Hastings-on-Hudson Board of Education. Apologies for the delay. We again we're returning from executive session. We're going to open up tonight with our student report because we know you guys are very busy. So I want to honor that. Welcome.
Thank you so much. All right, so it feels like a lifetime ago now, but 2 weeks ago, I and the rest of the peer leaders had our wonderful 3-day retreat from September 11th to the 13th. We went to the Taconic Outdoor Education Center, and we spent so many hours building connections between ourselves and the teachers and learning how to work effectively as a group. Lots of it involved team building games, which we then were able to play with our groups of freshmen on their retreat, which just happened yesterday on the 23rd. So we all gathered in the cafeteria in the morning, and the entire freshman grade, plus all 24 PLs and a couple of teachers, walked over to the Burke, and we spent the day in our groups doing all sorts of activities and games. We had lots of really meaningful conversations. It was really incredible. I know I had a fantastic time. Everybody got along great. And even through the unexpectedly rainy afternoon, we all did really well.
Right.
So 5 of my very good friends, I'm very blessed with incredibly brilliant friends, Frida Belasco, Charlotte Cho, Ben Emtaj, Natalie Garson, and Jasper Zimmerman recently got the news that they made it to the National Merit semifinalist round. So they are 5 of the 16,000 that qualify, which doesn't sound super impressive until you compare it with the 1.3 million students that took the preliminary PSAT. So huge congrats and lots of love to all of them. They're fantastic people. College visits are on a roll with one or more schools visiting daily. There's plenty of representatives that I'm super excited to see. I know I've got a meeting coming up tomorrow, actually, and it's been a really helpful way to learn about the schools that are tougher to visit and schools that I just want to learn more about. Lastly, for my part, there will be a 3-day week next week, thank goodness, with the school being out on Thursday and Friday for Rosh Hashanah. So I hope everyone gets a chance to rest from the chaos of this first month of school, and Shana Tova to everyone celebrating.
Excellent. Thank you, Kai. Thank you.
So this past Thursday was the Hastings High School first back to school night, and I believe it was a success with parents meeting all their kids' teachers. It was held from around 6 to 10 p.m., and the parents were able to learn about the curriculum and plans for each class. And then that following Friday, we had Hastings High School first pep rally of the year, and it was really welcoming and raising of school spirit for the upcoming football game. And all the grades wore their respective colors, with freshmen being yellow, sophomores being green, juniors being black, and seniors wore their senior shirts. And then the students followed an X-day schedule, so that all the classes were shortened, and we were able to enjoy the events and dances performed by the varsity teams. And this year's MCs, Jack Maney and Sienna Radley, brought energy and excitement to the crowd. We also had, so that following Saturday, we had homecoming, which was definitely high-spirited because the Hudsonettes did amazing with their performance, and the success of the football team, and also money raised by the clubs and student union. And then each point the football team was accompanied by the pep band, and we send our congrats to them for winning their homecoming game 16-0. And then this Wednesday and Thursday is the high school picture day, which will be on September 25th and September 26th. And students' designated days will correlate with their English classes. So if you have your English class on an E day, that will be on the 25th, and English class on an F day will be on the 26th. Thank you.
Thank you, Ellen. Thank you. Questions, comments? Thank you both.
Who are the peer leader advisors now?
So there's 3 advisors. The program is led by Mr. Conweiser, and then there's also Mr. Hunt and Ms. Mokler are the 3 who help us out.
Thank you.
Of course.
It was a lovely evening. That game was like a perfect night. So many people there. It was really great. I wish we could do more of those. And by the way, Maureen, I know there was a snafu with getting the lights, right? We had them, then we didn't
Yes,
have them,
yes.
and then you went to great lengths to get them, and thank goodness. 'cause it was-
Yeah, Drew definitely helped too. We just looked, to see, so we had booked the lights, we were really on top of it this year, and then a week before, they're like, oh, we can't bring the lights to you that day. So it was a mad scramble, but by both of us calling a variety of companies, we found somebody else. Drew actually found that company, so.
Okay, lovely.
Yeah, no, it's wonderful community evening, both nights, Friday and Saturday.
Great. Thank you both. Moving on to the big presentation to start off with tonight is the State of the District end of year update, presented by Dr. Szymanski. We're going to preface this a little bit, or you will?
Okay.
Oh, for you.
So it's my pleasure to present to all of you tonight on the State of the District. Tonight is part one of a sequential series. Today, we will be doing a comprehensive description of aggregated performance data and evidence, and following will be an analytical interpretation and action plans. Future discussion will also delve into the disaggregated data, as well as response to any additional questions that are raised by the board. And we are committed to examining multiple measures of student data to inform continuous improvement efforts and also to celebrate areas of our growth, of which there are many. So our commitment extends to sharing this information publicly. And what I wanted to begin with is actually not in this slide deck, though it is in board docs, and I'll switch over.
Hit escape.
It's not taking it. No. We're stuck.
Did it crash?
It's not taking it on a keyboard?
It's not taking it anywhere.
Need a battery?
No, not sure another one.
Yeah, because we had all the ones set up there.
Okay, so while that's happening, I will frame it and then I will show it.
Okay, here we go.
Okay. So it's in board docs, and as soon as we can get it up on the screen, we will. But there is a data cycle graphic that you'll see as a link within presentations. And the principals and special education and I are really committed to making sure that we're formalizing an iterative data cycle review process. And so the visual that you are about to see, I'll be up there a moment. Thanks, Patrick.
Go ahead, you don't need to.
Thank you. It offers a draft of the 6-step process, and that includes a comprehensive needs assessment, establishing annual goals, developing action plans, presentations and feedback, publicizing finalized goals, and engaging in progress monitoring. So this visual, which I'll show in just a moment, is in draft form, but it is something that we're thinking about as in terms of a very comprehensive, formalized process. Our key commitment around data is to use it in a way that impacts learners in a positive way. So not just this presentation, but it's actually being used formatively.
And while Melissa's moving on backfill, is for some of you as obvious as this is brand new in Hastings. And it reflects the new leadership you're seeing in multiple places in the district. And it's also that you've got a massive document before you tonight. The view is we're done just one-time massive documents. How can we have a year-long process of looking at data and evidence, looking at it in a descriptive way, then in an analytical and targeted action plan way, disaggregated and all the rest. And we're only about 3 or 4 years old, maybe 3 years old, even bringing any data and evidence at a large level. So now to have this cycle is very, very important.
No, would it be accurate to say, just to understand that, with the leadership in place now, that this is a K-12
Yes,
cycle?
yes.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
And I also want to recognize and thank Andy Clayman, who physically made the visual for it. So, yeah.
There's very strong support from the principals on this approach.
Okay, so there are 2 slide decks that are posted to board docs in addition to that visual. The first is a very comprehensive analysis for your review, and that is public and reference. The second is this presentation slide deck, which distills the key points from the extended version. So I can be a bit more brief, but you do have everything. As I present, I'd like to invite you to jot down any questions that arise, and what I'll do is I'll leave space at the end for all the questions, and if we need to toggle back to the visuals, I can do that. I'm presenting this evening on 3 areas: academic performance, social emotional experiences, and also behavioral performance. And as a caveat, the data are instructive rather than definitive. So a single point of information does not necessarily reflect the complexity of any one thing. And also, I want to point out that student cohorts are not identical from year to year. And that has to do with enrollment trends. It sometimes has to do with, when we get to the panorama data, I'll explain, we had a smaller cohort at certain levels take the panorama than we did at another point. So I just want to frame that so that we proceed with any kind of interpretation with caution. So here you can see the local data and the state data that will be presented to you tonight. And we will begin with English Language Arts Performance, also known as ELA. So at Hillside and Farragut Middle School, we administer the local STAR reading assessment, and that is K through 8. That is our diagnostic screener. And what you can see here in this table is that the large majority of students in K-8 performed at or above the benchmark on the STAR reading diagnostic screener. We are seeing higher percentages of students achieving or exceeding grade level benchmarks at the elementary school as compared to the middle school. We are also seeing inconsistent trends in the percentage of students at or above the benchmark over time as cohorts are moving through the middle school. And the way that you can look at that, I don't know if this pointer will work. So what I mean by that is that, for example, in grade 1, moving through over time, this particular group, you can see a trend if you look up the diagonal. So that's one piece of information. Whereas if you look at grade 3, for example, that 2022 grade 3, you see a different story. So we are seeing some inconsistent trends. So something to be noticing. With regard to the New York State assessment data, we do administer the ELA and the mathematics state assessments to students in grades 3 through 8 annually. So that's both content areas. And for the first time, computer-based testing was required by New York State in grades 5 and 8. And that's very relevant because it impacts in terms of how students take the test. We are not a district that had previously taken computer-based testing, so this was our first foray into that. And this year, the new state science assessment, this past year rather, was aligned to the P12 science learning standards. And also it was not given to students in grades 4, it was given to students in grades 5. So that's just a bit of context for you. So when we're looking at the ELA assessment data in 3 through 8, we're seeing a couple of different things. We're seeing overall strong performance on the New York State ELA assessment in grades 3 through 8. The strongest performance at Hillside was in grade 4, with 93% of students meeting or exceeding the proficiency standard. And that's a 3 is considered proficient by the state, and a 4 is exceeding proficiency. And so the percentages that you're seeing there are both meeting and exceeding, so the combined with that. The strongest performance at Farragut was in grade 8, with 88% of students meeting or exceeding the proficiency standard. And then when we're thinking about our performance overall relative to the BOCES Southern Westchester region, we're seeing a strong performance. So you can take a look at that through this heat map. I will explain a little bit about this heat map. So first of all, about the region. The districts that you see above are the BOCES Southern Westchester districts, of which we are one. What you see below is the heat map. And so again, we're looking at proficiency, so students scoring at a level 3 or above. The heat map is designed to reflect decile performance. So if you see a 1, for example, it means we performed in the first decile, the top 10%, or in this case, the top 3 schools. Okay, so lower numbers indicate a stronger performance, and also darker colors indicate a stronger performance for those who prefer that color visual. So local and state mathematics performance. So looking at Hillside and Farragut, again, the STAR Math is administered in grades K through 8. And really it's grades 1 through 8 because in kindergarten, students take the early literacy screener, and the early literacy screener also incorporates early math. So that's all in one. So overarching takeaways from our STAR assessment: there is a large majority of students in grades 1 through 8 that performed at or above benchmark on the STAR Math Diagnostic Screener. We're seeing higher percentages of students achieving or exceeding grade level benchmarks at the elementary school as compared to the middle school. And in general, since 2022, we're seeing increases in performance for both buildings. So if you look across the G column here, that indicates the grades. And if you look to the right, you're seeing, performance across the years. So you're able to see that some general trends in terms of, in general, you're seeing some increases in performance. A few years really isn't a ton of information to create trend data, but, just something to keep an eye on. Okay. And then the New York State Mathematics Assessment, the state test. Overall, we saw strong performance on the New York State Math Assessment, grades 3 through 8. In general, we've seen improvement at the middle school over the past few years. Again, something to pay attention to. The strongest performance at Hillside was in grade 4, with 94% of students meeting or exceeding the proficiency standard. And it is important to note that last year, there was a shift in curriculum to Reveal. And 2 years ago, you might remember me saying something about anticipating something called an implementation dip. This is not uncommon when something new is put in. Sometimes we see a decrease initially in performance and then, a rebound effect as teachers are learning something new. So when we see some performance declines, we can't definitively, again, attribute it to one thing. But it may be due in part to the first year change, any of the decreases that we see. The strongest performance of Farragut was in grade 8, with 93% of students meeting or exceeding the proficiency standard. And proficiency levels for grades 5, 6, and 7 will continue to be examined closely, given some notable differences compared to 4th and 8th grade. There are lower percentages of students achieving or exceeding grade level benchmarks in grade 6 relative to the BOCES Southern Westchester region, and that is reflected in this heat map here. So once again, darker indicates stronger performance, and when we're looking at the numbers, we're looking at that in terms of chunking those 30 districts into, deciles. So now moving on to the New York State Science Assessment. Again, this was a brand new assessment. Nobody in the entire region knew exactly what to expect because the students had not experienced it yet before. So while we had some information that would allow us to prepare, and we did have access to the standards and have been doing a lot of alignment work on that, we weren't sure what to expect completely because the students had never participated in the assessment before. So here we can see that there is developing performance on the New York State Science Assessment. But what's very important to note, and we don't have a heat map in the system yet for this, is that when we looked at each individual area, We performed very strongly within the BOCES Southern Westchester region, exceeding the success rate on almost every question in terms of how we compared with the region. And with that in mind, we're still continuing to dig deeply into the data to identify areas of strength and replicate those and then build across more areas. That said, so we have already, I've already initiated a data dive with elementary and middle school science teachers, and Melissa Shandroff was a key partner in that process as well. And we've done an analysis of performance frequency distribution, which is the percentage of students who scored at each level. So we looked at that. We also started looking at disaggregated data. So again, there will be follow-up discussion at the board table around some of our disaggregated data, but the teachers have looked at those charts and started their observations there. And forthcoming, I believe we have our next meeting this week, will be on Friday, actually, yes. Will be an analysis of the building benchmark report. And this report is an analysis of performance that's relative to each standard skill area, and also student performance reports for individual students. I want to recognize our fifth grade teachers and also Robin Farrell especially, you know, because the test at fifth grade is really a K-5 assessment. They have really rolled up their sleeves. They've been really curious about the performance. In fact, they have each gained access to our databases already, so they can do some individual sleuthing. So I really want to recognize, and I also want to strongly compliment our teachers who are really, really curious about this data and are using what they're finding to be able to impact their future work. So both with the professional learning and also thinking about any tweaks to program as well. And they were very reflective on, you know, they did really well here and we didn't expect so much of this other thing. We have to make sure that, you know, that we're thinking about these types of reviews and building this in. So just really hands-on team, and I just want to compliment them publicly on that work. So we're going to continue to dedicate efforts to our continuous improvement in science. But again, really happy in terms of what we were looking at regionally, and also very cognizant that we have a lot of work to do to move the needle. So now we'll shift to an exploration of our region's data, and important context is provided on this slide. So when you're looking at Algebra 1 this evening, you're going to see that it reflects middle school and high school performance. The earth science reflects middle school performance, and then everything else we'll be looking at together reflects high school performance. Another important area to note, June 2023 was the very first administration of the new U.S. History and Government Regents. June 2024 was the first administration of the new Algebra Regents. So overall, we are seeing strong proficiency on Regents examinations across all content areas. And when we say proficiency being strong, we're really thinking about 90% and above. That's considered to be strong. And that is not empirical. That is just my opinion professionally.
That's really impressive.
Right?
This is really impressive.
Right, right.
It's
So
the value of the region.
yes, yes. So we are going to continue to monitor our performance in global history and earth science, especially given upcoming changes to the earth science exam that are around the corner. So very strong proficiency. Now, this slide also shows some opportunities for us. So we also see some gaps between proficiency and mastery for all Regents assessments, which are especially sizable for algebra and U.S. history and government. So in these two areas, algebra and U.S. history and government, mastery level performance is below 50% when we consider both buildings. And in other content areas, mastery performance is over 70%. Additional attention is necessary. I do want to flag, importantly, that the proficiency and mastery gap in U.S. history has changed in the last couple of years because of the state making changes to the exam. They've made it longer, they've made it more difficult, they've made the grading rubric harder to achieve mastery. But what we're seeing here is the difference between a passing score, being proficient, and then mastery level, 85% or above. We'll now move into social emotional data. And over the past few years, we've used Panorama survey resources. And those resources have been developed by researchers at the Harvard Graduate School of Education and Panorama Education to understand student perceptions of their overall social and learning climate. So we plan to continue administration of the social emotional learning Panorama survey for grades K through 12 this year. So we'll start with Hillside, and we'll start with grades K through 2. And in grades K through 2, we looked at 4 areas. We looked at emotion regulation, social awareness, self-efficacy, which is this belief, I believe I can achieve, right? I believe in my own power and my own agency. And then also social perspective taking. The teachers took the survey on behalf of the students, and that's due to the developmental age of the students. And the results are ranging widely across these areas across the year. So when you're looking across the year from 51% all the way to 81% favorable. And when we're thinking about favorable, it means that 81% of the, if you're saying like 81% favorable, for example, it means that 81% of the responses across all questions on a topic were favorable. They were in the affirmative.
Do you mind showing the response rate?
Sure,
Thank you.
happy to. Can you hear me? Just picking it up? Okay, so when we're saying a strong response rate at Hillside, I think the quickest thing to do is run your eyes down column D, and you can see what percentage of participation occurred at each of the grade level bands.
Why so low, 9 through 12?
And this is compared to the previous year.
Melissa can speak to 9-12 issues.
Yeah.
Clearly,
Sure.
an obvious one.
Sure, and I don't have to wait for that. I won't wait until the high school slide since it came up. So we do 3 administrations, and in the spring administration, we lost a number of students due to, internships, et cetera, just based on the timing this year. And also, I believe it was administered, and I can double check this, but it was not administered during a specific class time as it had been previously. So we may need to move back to a more structured approach because we got a very low response rate. Bless you. So that's what you're seeing there in terms of the high school. Okay. So in the spring, we're seeing some narrowing of the ranges of those 4 areas, K through 2, 57% to 76% favorable. And social perspective taking remains the area with the lowest favorability rating, which is 57%. And emotion regulation remains the area with highest favorability rating, which is the same as the previous year. In grades 3 through 12, and I know that we're looking at grades 3 and 4, but I just want to frame this. So in grades 3 through 12, there are 2 overarching areas that were explored. The first is student competency and well-being, and the second area is student supports and environment. Student competency and well-being is assessed by examining 6 indicators, and you can see them here. They're situated the farthest to the right. So these last 6 indicators, Panorama bands together, and those are all under the umbrella of student competency and well-being. So when you hear me speak to that for the rest of the presentation, those are the 6 areas I'm referring to. And then as for the other 4, working backwards, we are looking at student supports and environment, and that's these 4 here. All right, and that is consistent 3 through 12, so I'll just outline that now here. So with regard to student competency and well-being, the right-hand side, in grades 3 and 4, spring 2024 results show that the majority responses in these areas were favorable, 66% to 93%. And similar to the past few years, 2023 and spring 2022, the most favorable spring results were reported for supportive relationships. And that's actually not surprising, and that's 93%. Similar to spring 2023 and spring 2022, self-efficacy shows an increase since the fall. And emotion regulation has had the lowest percentage of favorable responses across the school year, which is actually in direct contrast with the K through 2 results. All other areas have been relatively stable since the fall. With regard to student supports and environments in grade 3 and 4, the 4 indicators to the left, spring 2024 results show that the majority responses in these areas were favorable, 70% to 81%. And then similar to the past year, teacher-student relationship shows an increase since the fall. All other areas have been relatively stable. And now we'll shift to the middle school. In grade 5, spring 2024 student competency and well-being results, the areas to the right, show that the majority responses in these areas were favorable, 63% through 87%. And similar to last year and the year before, the most favorable spring results were reported also for supportive relationships, 87%. And all other areas have been relatively stable since the fall. In student supports and environment, grade 5, the majority responses in these areas were also favorable, 61% to 75%. And results show steady decreases in each of these areas since the fall, however, and that is similar to last year. When we move to grades 6 through 8, student competency and well-being in grades 6 through 8 in the spring, majority responses were favorable, 55% to 84%. Similar to last year and the year before, most favorable spring results were supportive relationships at 84%, and all areas have been relatively stable since the fall, with the exception of decreases in self-management and challenging feelings. And again, that's also similar to last year's data. Spring 2024 results show that the majority of responses in the areas of teacher-student relationships and sense of belonging were favorable, but not in school climate and not in engagement. Engagement was at 35%. Similar to last year and the year before, results showed decreases in all 4 areas from the fall to the spring. So we will be examining these results and declines more deeply. Moving on to the high school. Again, we had very weak participation in the spring, so I really want to reiterate we need to interpret this extremely cautiously. This is a very small sample. We can't glean much, frankly. So, but what we are seeing is majority favorable responses with those who took the survey. The most favorable spring results were reported for supportive relationships. All areas have been relatively stable since the fall, with the exception of increases in self-efficacy and positive feelings. In student supports and environment, the left-hand side indicators, majority responses in teacher-student relationships, school climate, and sense of belonging were favorable, but not in engagement. There are substantive increases noted since winter in all areas. Again, very small sample size. All right, so we'll move on to behavioral data. So it goes without saying that we are a safe, secure, and healthy school district. We are highly attentive to understanding and supporting student behaviors. We do, of course, like other places, have some variations from that, and overall, we are a happy place. 2 objectives are paramount, and so we want to make sure we're providing transparency and clarity, both around behaviors and consequences. We believe strongly in disciplinary consequences and also coupling those things with a restorative approach. We must, by law, protect student privacy. We are not able to share much, and that is very frustrating at times, especially when we have moments as a district. And it requires a tremendous leap of faith and trust when we have those moments, because by law, students are protected as they should be. And also when things happen, we can't talk much about them because we don't want to we want to make sure we're not identifying individuals or jeopardizing their privacy. What I'd like to do today is go back to what I outlined previously around DASA and VADER and provide a quick reminder about those 2 things. And I'd also like to talk briefly about our suspension data. So, DASA, the Dignity for All Students Act. So one thing I wanted to reiterate that I said last year is that not every insult or report of bullying behavior is covered by DASA. So every report of bullying, harassment, and/or discrimination needs to, and we want to, make sure we investigate and resolve. However, things can be founded under our code of conduct, which is a student has made a violation of the code of conduct. However, it doesn't mean it necessarily rises to a material incident under the Dignity Act. Reportable incidents to the state, which are anonymous, but when we report an incident to the state, it's limited to founded material incidents, incidents that are founded to be rise to that level of bullying and harassment, the definition under DASA. So DASA also falls into violent and disruptive incidents. If you're thinking about an umbrella, right, school districts have to annually report founded violent and disruptive incidents on a report that they make. It's called the VADER report, Violent and Disruptive Incident Report. The required categories for reporting are quite serious. You see them all there. And DASA would fall under that area of intimidation, harassment, menacing, or bullying. So as documented below, the Hastings Public Schools had 5 founded VADER incidents in 2023-24, all of which were within the category of intimidation, harassment, menacing, or bullying, and 3 of which were counted as DASA violations that rose to a material incident.
So those 3 are also part of the 5.
Correct. So in general, we're a district of over 1,600 students. Our numbers are small. And, as in other places, students make mistakes. Students violate the code of conduct. Students are held accountable for their behavior. And we ensure that there's also an opportunity to restore harm that's been done as well. So DASA and VADER incidents are all violations of the Code of Conduct. And there have been violations of the Code of Conduct in all 3 buildings over the year that have not risen to material incidents under DASA. And this year, we're going to continue to strengthen our alignment and record-keeping protocols across all 3 buildings to ensure that incidents that rise to the level of suspension are entered into eSchool data, which is also different from reporting them, which we report all of them, but they aren't always entered, in terms of the record-keeping system. So we really do want to strengthen that alignment so that we automate a lot of these things in a very consistent way across all 3 buildings. That's the repository we're using for student data. We've also seen a number of code of conduct violations, And the ones I will show you on the next slide are the ones that have resulted in either an in-school suspension or an out-of-school suspension. So not every single code of conduct violation, but I will flag for us this evening the in-school and out-of-school suspensions on this slide, okay? So those have risen to suspension. When I look across general themes around code of conduct violations in general, we're seeing some developmental differences. We continue to augment and refine eSchool for tracking behavior incidents, and not even necessarily the ones that are rising to the level of suspension. But we're seeing at the elementary school a lot of cursing, a lot of physical behavior, kicking, hitting. FMS, we've seen hate speech or symbols, physical behavior, threatening. And at the high school level, confrontation. So these are the more serious themes in terms of code of conduct that have resulted in suspensions. And this is part one of a multi-step data process. And I thank you, and I'd like to invite any questions that you have.
Right, Melissa.
Let me just, one clarifying thing. I mean, one, you're going to ask lots of questions, but Melissa, thank you. This is an incredible set of work, and now with the principals joining in, as this diagram shows, we're going to shift to really a multi-year look, and also you have three big parts to this. You're not going to see three big parts put again together. We'll break those out, separate those. But that's an important, really important gelling of the three principles with Melissa on how can we be data and evidence oriented. And let me say one other thing, and then I'll be quiet. Mature communities don't look for one number. We're humans. No one number explains any of us. No one day. It's multiple days, multiple indicators. So I want to assure the board or ask the board to agree that this is data and evidence about multiple indicators, multiple approaches, and some people talk, what does that mean? I go very simple. I got 4 children. No one day tells me what's going on with my child. I need many, many days, many, many hours, many, many moments, and that's education. And you try and pull that together systematically. And again, Melissa, thank you, because you have rallied now a team of 4 plus SPED to really begin looking at this comprehensively, and that's new for Hastings. So now we'll open up to questions.
Any comments, questions?
I have a very specific question. So back on slide 24, it was the Regents exams, and there was a distinction between those who took Algebra 1 in the middle school and those who took it in the high school and the level of mastery.
Yes.
Is the discrepancy in the mastery level expected to be that because students who would have been taking it as 8th graders were accelerated, that they might be typically stronger students in algebra versus those who are taking it in high school?
So I think that is a very good theory, and it is one that we will poke around into more as we delve a little bit more deeply into the data. But we do have, it's one theory. We can perhaps say it's multiple reasons why our Algebra 1 students at FMS performed at the mastery level in a much stronger way. We're looking at different buildings, we're looking at different teachers, we're looking at, we have sat together, and I do want to recognize and thank Greg Stevens, like bringing everyone together with Algebra 1 and actually looking at areas that we can tweak in terms of our program. But this is a beginning, and there's not a definitive reason that I can put forth on the table to say this is why we're seeing it. It's raising some good questions for us to delve into for the analytical part.
Was it shared with us this way last year? I'm just trying to remember, because I don't remember there being a highlight of the discrepancy, because I was trying to find out whether or not this is like one blip or if it's been kind of like that.
So I remember, if I'm remembering correctly, I shared it in the same way I did this year on the comprehensive slide deck, the larger one. What I did here was specifically for talking points to encapsulate it, so I wasn't flipping through 20 slides for all of you to be efficient. But if this is a helpful visual, I can put it forth this way.
and if I may, a little color there is, again, the team saying we value this work, data evidence, can we look at those differentials?
Right.
So it had been there, but the team saying with Melissa's lead, let's make this that much more clear. Because we could say, hey, Lake Wobegon, we're all at 98, 98. Well, wait a minute, we've got a little difference if we think about mastery.
Right. Well, actually, on that point, and this slide is a great example of it. When I look at data, this is helpful, but it's so in the aggregate. And I look at this and I'm like, I want to know the story of our students with disabilities. I want to know the story of various subgroups in our community, our students of various racial backgrounds. Stemming from No Child Left Behind in 2001, when data has been disaggregated, I just need to know the stories of our students through data, not in the blip in time, but over 5 years. Like, what are the trends? How are they doing? How are these subgroups succeeding or not succeeding in our district? Because I think that can really inform us what's happening in a granular sense. Because seeing that all kids are getting 3 and 4s, I'm like, that's nice, but I kind of want to know, how are the girls doing? How are the boys doing? Looking at this, I'm like, well, who's in algebra? Are girls in? Boys in? What about students with disabilities? What about students of color? I just have so many questions, and I would love for us to begin to unpack that with our data and just go a little bit deeper. Great. On that same note, data can tell us so much about teaching and be such a force of exploration. I'm always using this example. But with 4th grade math, I remember my children had an outstanding year in 4th grade math. And I know that 4th grade math lead teacher is really into data and disaggregating it and has been playing with it. And just the power of looking at data and trends across grades, looking at the actually testing items and saying, look at these items around fractions. Like, over a course of 5 years, are all of our students doing well in fractions? Are some of them doing well in fractions in one class or another class? Just to see if maybe we can learn something about our teaching and where our strengths and weaknesses are, instead of looking at it from a student's lens, also looking at it across from a teaching lens. And in this way, are we also reaching all students or some students, and what are the trends there? Because I think what's beautiful is you've been collecting all of this data now, the testing data for a long time, but I think you've done so much by bringing the STAR assessment to us as well. But I just want to hear more about the various subgroups, but also how it's directly impacting the teaching.
Yep. Yeah, and I will speak to a couple things. So just getting back to what you were saying, Sylvia, and also to highlight what Bill was saying. So Scott Wynn was very keyed in to the differentials between the proficiency and the mastery, and he and I had those conversations too. And so the way it was previously presented wasn't all on that one sheet like that, which we can visually do that. But I do want to credit him for being really curious about that gap. And to what you were just saying, that's exactly the process that we just started with the 5th grade around the science with Robin. Mm-hmm. And we are looking at that not only in terms of particular standards and, thinking about the disaggregated data, but they're looking at individual student reports. Are really curious about it. And I do have to say, when I first came here, the culture around data was really different. Hastings is a place where, the professionals here are really strong thinkers. They have very big hearts. They love their students. They're very holistic about how they interact with students. And now what I'm seeing is, on top of that, there's a really strong curiosity around how data can be used as a driver to be even more holistic, dare I say, to be able to meet students' needs. So it's great. It's not, I think what used to be was a more, I don't know if concern is the right word, or of a more reductionist approach if we were just looking at numbers. But now I think what people are doing is just exactly what you said, and that it was, you articulated it better than I did, but it was the reason I gave the shout out to that science crew, because they immediately went to their program, the alignment work they did, they started thinking about what they needed to shift in their practice, and that takes not only just this, an ability to goes without saying, every teacher in this district is wholly invested in children, in terms of they wouldn't be doing their work if they didn't have their whole heart and being in this work. But it really speaks to the fact that there's there's a beauty in being a humble educator to know that there's nothing wrong, and also there's a lot that we can always be doing to continuously improve our practice. And looking at data and getting curious about that and thinking about that in tandem with your program is the way in.
Any other questions?
Oh, sorry, do you have a question? No, I did, no, I just went, you go.
On slide 17, you mentioned the decline over time for grades 3 through 4 from 2022, right? That trend seems consistent on slides 15 and slide 11 for all state assessments. It seems like the trend goes down each one, and then if you play into the heat maps on slides 12 and 18, it also shows some of the highest numbers, which shows that lowest average scores per county.
Yeah.
So my question is, have you been able to identify why the trend is going down in 3 through 5 and 4 through 6 also?
In terms of the ELA assessment, you're saying? 3 through 5? And
Yeah, it's consistent on the ELA state assessment, the math state assessment, and on slides 11, 15, and 17. It's kind of showing it consistent. So 11, if you look at G3 and G4, and then their grade in 2022 to grade 24, you show consistent decline. On slide 15, you show that same decline for those same students. 3, and then 4 with a lesser decline, but a decline. And then on slide 17, you show it most alarmingly with the 75% proficient in grade 5 for these students. You're showing a downward slope. And then playing into the heat map on slide 12, you have the 6th grade with a 4. And I think the most alarming number is on slide 18, which has a 7 for grade 6. So there seems like a consistent trend from 3rd through 5th and 4th through 6th with high levels of numbers in the heat map. Have you ascertained why possibly that data is trending downward? Because if you look at the other grades, everything's kind of trending upwards.
So I can say we have not definitively identified it yet, and it is something for us to dig into. And it is, there are some things that we need to look at in addition to just, in terms of not only program, but I think that it's important to be thinking about other shifts that have happened. So in is it coincidental? So in mathematics, if we put a new program in and, raises the question, we're starting to see some trend data. The question is 3 years enough? Well, it's enough for right now. It's enough that we need to dig in more deeply to that.
Yeah.
So I'll put that on our list for follow-up.
That's a key question for us to
Yeah.
carry forward.
I think it might be worth looking back 2 years with that same, well, you can't go back with those. You can go 1 year back for the 4th graders and see if that trend continues that way. And then next year, is there something in that particular grade? Are there students that aren't receiving enough services, the correct evaluation? There are many different layers, and exactly like you both said, the data tells a story and you can analyze it, but it's not telling the total story at all. But I see a lot of uptrends, and then I see those 2 downtrends. And if I was a parent of a 6th grader and I saw that data, I would say, why is the students in my class in a downward trend? So those questions might come up.
Thank you.
Could we go to the screener? I know the response rate for the high school is really low. And
Panorama?
the diorama, sorry.
Yep.
But we know that social emotional well-being is at an all-time low in middle and high schools, and it's such a concern that our students' well-being. So yes, we have to get a higher response rate, and we can only somewhat interpret this, but those are not great numbers. And for some of them, like the engagement, do we actually have the actual items and questions so we can see what's being asked of them and how they're responding? Because it seems like those kind of questions could be informative for mental health leaders and teachers in the schools. And then also curious, when you break it down by gender, by race, ethnicity, by students with disabilities, like, how are they feeling across the environment? I'm really curious, like how, because I think this all translates and speaks to our school climate and who's feeling accepted and safe. So I would just ask to dig a little deeper, or if we could get some of that data. I know we can get some of it off of the NYSED website ourselves, but any of that disaggregated would be really helpful.
I can actually speak to the engagement questions at the high school level. I do happen to have those readily available, and other things I'll follow up on. But high school, grades 9 through 12, the engagement questions, there were 5 of them at the high school level. How excited are you about going to your classes? How often do you get so focused on activities in your classes that you lose track of time? In your classes, how eager are you to participate? When you are not in school, how often do you talk about ideas from your classes? And the last, overall, how interested are you in your classes? So those were the 5 at the high school level that were posed around engagement.
Thank you.
So, Melissa, Alex, were you going to say something?
No, I'll wait.
Okay. I just want to thank you. I think this is an enormous amount of work and information, and I'm always a little overwhelmed with this kind of data of what you look at, what you don't, what we make of it, what we do with it. But I trust it in your hands to kind of look at this stuff. I'm always, I was very struck by, as we all were, I think, with the Regents. We don't need to look at it, but the difference between the proficiency and the mastery. And this comes from someone who's always been kind of meh about the Regents. I chaired a college admissions committee where people had to take Regents, and I was always struck by certain schools where they teach to the Regents, and yet you would get other kids whose Regents maybe weren't as high, who were really smart and really intellectually engaged, and it just, I never know quite how to understand it, and yet, you want to think that here that there would be many, many more kids who would be in the mastery percent, and I don't know what we do or how we do that, but it's just kind of an interesting, it's a good first step that we're here. Well, not first step, but the step that we are. But I just thank you for doing all of this. It's a lot to think about and a lot, I guess, to learn from and figure out what we can take from it, what we want to take from it and do with it. Because there's too much, honestly, too much to do everything you want to do.
That's the challenge, right? You can't do everything well simultaneously. Right. You can move the needle on things, however, you really have to dig into one or two areas at a time really deeply. So identifying those highest priority needs and making sure that the data is pointing us in that direction of where we need to go. And then we couple that with a systemic approach. I've really appreciated the work of the Professional Learning Committee around the curriculum review cycle. So we have different areas of focus, and I can speak more to that when we get into analysis. But some of what we do is looking at program and thinking about not just alignment to standards, which we could consider the floor rather than the ceiling, but also thinking about the portrait and working together with the principals, especially around the authentic learning goal, and thinking about what that's going to look like over the course of our faculty meetings, and how we make sure that this work reaches students and also reaches teachers, so that it's not just hard work, but it's also heart work, like that they're picking things that matter and that can then be applied to their practice. So we're working on that together too.
Yeah, can I pick up that? Because I think it's a really important point. We think about the Regents and what the score is, right? And these are tests that are given, largely up to 8th grade, right? I feel like in the case of my own children, the Regent scores were okay or were pretty good, but they learn to be better students as they get older and as they go through the system. So to Melissa's point, that the way this data informs the decisions that are made, whether it's professional development, or most importantly, which you haven't brought up tonight, which is how it can direct kids into MTSS, so they're getting additional support. So even though the number may not be perfect or as high as it could be, I think the pathway that you're talking about with the portrait and authentic learning is, how do you take a student who's doing fine, developmentally appropriate, whatever you want to say, and get them to keep moving ahead as they move up into the high school. And so, that's never going to be reflected in this data, but sort of to your point, I don't, personally, as like a parent, I don't focus too much on those scores. It's sort of that whole arc that the kids make as they mature. And I feel like, again, we didn't talk about it yet, but I feel like the systems of support that we put in place early for these kids, and with the math interventionist, those things bear fruit. I remember when one of my kids got additional support in math, and as a parent, at first you're like, oh my God, why do they need it? Do they need it? Or one score and they then they're directed this way. But then, and even my child was like, I don't need this. Why do I need this? But then over time, that they came to really like that class, and it helped them. So it's like, it's again, we don't touch on that, but there's a lot. This data is not just to figure out which things to give ourselves accolades for. It's also identifying which kids need additional support. And if you could give a little bit of background on how this fits in with that, I think it would be edifying to hear.
Yeah, sure. So, Alex brought up MTSS, so that's a multi-tiered system of support, and it includes a place for academic goals and learning, and also supports for social emotional. So the MTSS is that umbrella. And so when students are taking a state assessment, if they fall below a particular cut score, they're essentially, for lack of a better word, flagged for an additional look. And then there are building level processes in place to triangulate some multiple measures of data to see if they then qualify for academic intervention service. So that is an immediate safety net. And then in addition to that, when we're seeing students that are having some difficulty in terms of their performance or their growth, they can be referred internally, void of the state test, just internally to the MTSS table for interventions to be put into place too. And so those things are really important. And it is, the state test is valuable in the sense of it gives districts information about their program and the extent to which we are aligned to standards. It also flags a closer look at individual students in terms of strengths and areas for growth, right? I also just want to caution us, I want to keep us very firmly focused on data, and I also want to caution us to not hang our hat on the state tests as the important thing, because for me anyway, it is really about the learning. We want to make sure that students are learning, and the tests are a moment in time, and there are different reasons why students would perform well or not as well on a state test. Some of it can be our program, some of it can be anything from test anxiety to you name it, right? So there are reasons. In general, it gives us a sense of our program. And that gives them value to districts in terms of what we're looking at in our continuous improvement efforts.
Could you talk about the role of the STAR screener in the continuous improvement? Because that seems like a more direct and helpful way to translate these test scores into actually direct student support.
Yes, happy to. So years back, there was a committee that got together, and we went through a process of figuring out which diagnostic screener we wanted to adopt for our district. And overwhelmingly, after looking at a couple of different possibilities, Star Renaissance was selected, and largely with teacher voice, and in terms of wanting to make sure that that was the one we went with. And it is really a gold standard in terms of diagnostic screening. So it allows us to see at multiple points throughout the year, not just the one state test moment, how students are performing, where they are conceptually stronger, conceptually weaker, and it also points us in directions of like prerequisites that they still may need to be able to make advancements. So it's incredibly helpful. It also flags students in the same way the state test might with the cut score for potential MTSS. So if they're below proficiency or they are in the red, which the STAR considers like at risk, they get scooped up. And so the building can look at those students very quickly and begin an MTSS process. It's also used in conjunction with the state assessment, so you can see pretty quickly if a student had a bad day on the test. Whereas if they are in the green, they're doing really well on the assessment, the STAR diagnostic screener, but maybe they didn't meet the proficiency standard on the state tests and fell below the cut score for consideration. When you look at that with their classroom grades, with the STAR assessment, you can really get a sense of who to prioritize in terms of those intervention services.
Thank you.
Any other questions, comments? No? Thank you, Melissa.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on to the next presentation for tonight, it's going to be of the digital learning and instructional technology update from Dr. McCarthy.
My colleague in technology and expertise will shift us over.
Escape is working now.
All right. If you let me do it, we'll be here till tomorrow. So, you can hold me to the following. I do not read PowerPoint presentations. They speak for themselves, especially the way I write them. So the first part of this, up through page 6, is purposely so that if anyone ever picked this up, they don't have to go hunting for the rest of the story. So what I mean is, and Patrick, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay.
Just bring in the mic a little bit.
I'm told you can hear me anywhere, but anyway. So this is just a review how we arrived where we did based on my and the team with me making a big statement at the end of the last school year about how digital learning and technology had to be a priority. Not up here is as systematic and organized as we've been, it kind of become the wild, wild west. And either I take blame or credit for getting that phrase out there, and some people grabbed hold of it and said, yes, indeedy. So now follow up, please. So, and that came out of good work last year of a technology committee, so it's all up here. Quite important is that rationale, which is written a bit differently than when you last saw it. And I keep celebrating the growing team paying attention to this work. So actually a number of the principals looked at what had been the rationale, and they said, Bill, let us reword that, and that's what's now there. I think for the time being, that's a very good rationale as to what our point is with digital learning and technology. We need to have it as we look to our young people's future. And I think that's an excellent rationale, freshened up by a number of the principals in particular. This is, again, an aspect of where we are, but also where we're headed. New York State, which I fondly call the Empire State, has requirements. And they require that we have an instructional tech plan, which exists. And Maureen and Melissa were instrumental in us having that plan. And whatever we're doing now will no doubt build into a new required plan shortly. So we have to keep an eye on that. Last year, thanks to a committee, which then I dovetailed with parent input and also listening to students, came up with a set of first tier and second tier. First tier largely immediate, second tier probably just as important, but maybe more systematic, a set of concerns and needs. There are 9 of them. So that was the first tier, then the second tier here. Again, you can read this later, but this is to get us up to the point of, all right, where are we? And I'm going to get very focused right now, go building by building and then district-wide. Early August, I sent a letter. If anyone was reading letters from me in early August, I put out some updates as to our progress, and we've even made improvements since then. Hillside, as I listened last year, and I'm in the Hillside classrooms a lot, it's just a wonderful school with real focus on learning, very robustly. It seemed we had really a communication challenge. How do we let families know as best we can what is in those classrooms? Back to school nights and all the rest are wonderful, but we are in an age where families and parents are rarely in the classroom. So tomorrow, Amy Kazis and team will provide a incredibly detailed, and I've seen it, but she said I can't do any more than I'm just saying now. This is the teaser. She's going to present an incredibly detailed document for families on what is happening at each grade as it relates to the use of digital learning, my phrase, digital learning and technology. Back to school nights had that in each room, but that was brief, but this will be much more detailed, built out by the Hillside faculty and staff. So Hillside parents, please be on the lookout for that. So that's a key aspect of last year. We need to work on that. Amy's grabbed hold of that, and we'll see how we do with that step. We come into the middle school, and I think, as even Mr. Wynn would say, this was the heart of the wild, wild west. And we've made some progress. As most know, we issued late in the summer the requirement that only district-issued devices would be used. And as best we can tell, that's actually going pretty well in the middle school, technically, supply-wise, all the rest. I really thank the faculty at FMS for working with and going along with what might have felt a little top-down. It wasn't, because we listened and we said this is real need. So in the Chromebook, that's underway, and we're constantly listening, constantly adjusting where we need to. YouTube, and Melissa, I'm going to give you like a one-sentence warning. We've moved on YouTube and had to keep trying to adjust and fix because it is a challenge. That is a place where teachers in part said, what just happened? Who moved our cheese? What is going on here? So we are working to severely, and that's a strong word, limit student access to YouTube, but still keep instructional access. And I didn't warn you, but
I'm happy to speak to it. And I'm happy to speak to it. So YouTube is still available to teachers, and so often they are drawing from different resources to be able to teach into in their work. I mean, there was never an intention to limit that. What is happening is, in some cases, there are direct pushes of YouTube to students that had happened in the past with specific instructional assignments. And what we thought is that since the teachers had access, it would not be an issue in terms of any kind of instructional use. But lo and behold, the students can't access even what teachers may be assigning. So Maureen Carballo and I have been meeting with Donald Kendrick to see what we can do to address that. We've made great headway around that. We're very close to a solution as of today. There's been a lot of work that's been done leading up to today. I will be running some potential solutions by the leadership team on the 1st, and then bringing it to Chair Council on the 7th. And what I can say is that we want to make sure that if there's something that's of value to instructional use to students, we want to make sure that we are preserving that and also respecting that expertise. The last thing that I'll just add anecdotally is I happen to come from a Portrait of a Hastings Learner Behavioral Charter Committee meeting today, and it was a largely attended meeting. It was a K-12 crew at the table, and what I'm hearing is that it's been a real blessing to not have access to it for students' unfettered use of it, and also this small but mighty group, I mean large for a committee, but small in terms of district, also said having the district issued devices has been incredibly helpful because it limits, it actually amplifies controls in terms of what people have access to. So that came right from a 3:30 to 4:30 meeting today. So I am happy to share that at the table as well.
And we know there's other uses of these devices other than YouTube. So don't just think we're a YouTube-only district.
Oh, yeah.
At a later meeting, we can run down the laundry list of all the different ways that, I can't even get the right terms, but all those things that people get to through digital to help their learning. So trust me, but this was the tip of the iceberg, or a big, big issue. Mobile phones, we have not allowed them in the middle school. We've been doubling down, tripling down on that. Scott is thinking really hard on that. Our new incoming assistant principal is coming out of Wagner, where he had been leading actually the removal or isolation or control of mobile phones. We're ahead of that here, but we're bringing in an assistant principal very thoughtful on this issue. So which brings us to the high school. Let me work backwards. Late in August, the leadership of both the high school and the middle school said, if you're gonna control access to devices at FMS, i.e. Chromebooks, let's just go ahead and do it at the high school. We've had to be immediately quick on our feet and flexible, maybe that's a fleet feet thing, because there are some programs, science research and others that need more than a Chromebook can allow, and there are other things there. But I think it was very smart to be as connected and coordinated as possible between the two buildings, and we're then making that decision. We were into it. but then listening where we have to be flexible. The plan, as you may recall, from an early iteration of this was, Andy Clayman, Melissa Hardesty would work with faculty on how to make that transition. The decision was made at the leadership retreat, let's just go there now and then come back and make adjustments. And so that listening is going on. Mobile phones in classrooms, we are, I don't know who else is using this verb, but we're pouching. And that's something where I think the students are largely working with us on that. Lou Pietro and Melissa Hardesty put that in about a year and a half ago. It is going well. We're helping our newer faculty make sure they're doing that. Melissa Hardesty is, before she departs, really insisting on that. I think that our faculty are embracing that. And actually how we, and here's the key, keep the phones out of instructional time. For all the words, keep the phones out of instructional time. And that's what Andy Clayman, Mr. Clayman said at the back to school tonight. It was one of actually the applause moments in the very full auditorium. Now beyond instructional time, what's happening with mobile phones? And that's where we do want to have that conversation, that discussion. And when we get to Q&A here in about 3 minutes, here's the prime for that. They're holding off a little bit on that discussion for 2 reasons. One is the high school would like clarity on where you as a board. I think I know the answer. But they also are wondering where the governor's going to land. Because the governor's been very explicit about coming out with something. What I now know from some homework over the last couple of days, and it's very helpful I go spend time with superintendents because then they will give me the inside information. No doubt the governor will build this into the new budget because New York State's one of the 6 states in the nation where you can actually put a non-budgetary item in the budget to have it happen. So likely that's where it'll go, which means any outcome on that won't be till late in the spring. Then the very thoughtful superintendents or 2 are saying to me, don't wait. If Hastings is committed to this issue, get busy on it. Because it could be anything from what you're already doing, pouches, doubtful all outright ban, but we also see what California just put in, but also put a 2-year runway in on it. So I think it's something for the board then, and I think this is your answer, is to say, but we'll get back to this, faculty, staff in the high school with Andy Clayman, Melissa Hardesty, students, please get busy on what is the plan for Hastings. Don't wait for the governor. But let's see. District-wide, if I was as efficient as those who work with me, this slide would have more advance on it. The survey and a number of the parents, including in this room, have been brilliant at providing me the most comprehensive survey possible on this question. I've been a little bit tactical here because what we're surveying is shifting. We've made some significant changes just in the last month in terms of the digital world here in Hastings. So I want us to survey as much of what's real at this moment and what we'd hope for as opposed to what may have used to been. So there's a reason for going a little bit slower now in the survey, but we will survey. The other thing is the Tech Advisory Committee. We're going to get that together as the membership you see here, and we will get that going. And then you as a board, if November's right, you're busy. We brought you a lot tonight, but if November feels right, we'll come back with another update at that point. Which brings us to Q&A, and if you don't remember, about 3 minutes ago, I gave you one question. How do you want us to think about mobile phones in the high school?
I would like to ask the students, could we, what their thoughts are?
Thanks, Jody. You beat me to it.
Yes. I know it's personal. You don't have to speak on behalf of student body, but just a little student input.
Well, I'll start off. I know that my teachers have done a really good job of making sure that our phones are staying in the little pockets that we have for the entirety of the class. They're constantly counting each phone that's there. A lot of my teachers have assigned us each number, so it's very clear that if there's a phone missing, exactly who and why. Last year, I experienced more classes where we would have teachers saying, oh, use your phones, do X, Y, and Z. As of this year, I have not had one class in which a teacher has actually asked us to get our phones out of the pockets. I think that the idea of outright banning phones, which I know has been expressed in a couple of different districts, is It's an idea. It's a possibility. My personal concern is enforcing it. I know that even the phone pockets caused quite an uproar in, my grade and the couple of grades around us. So I think that as of right now, this situation is better than I had expected when it was first introduced. Yeah.
You think it's good to not to have phones in the classroom?
I think that when it comes to active learning time, it's definitely better to have the phones away. The most distracting part now is if someone's phone is going off in the pocket and the teacher has to pat around and try and figure out whose phone is ringing. So while providing a bit of entertainment, it's really much less distracting than wondering, oh, is someone trying to call me and my phone's in my bag or in my pocket? And oh, what if I just sneak a little peek? It's in front of the classroom. Absolutely nobody is able to get out and check a message. So I think that it's definitely been beneficial and much less distracting to have them up on the wall.
Yeah. Ella, what about you?
I do agree with Kai in the sense that it's a lot less distracting. And it's also nice when teachers will put their phones in too. So it's not like during class they'll check their phones. So we all go through the same thing. But also, I feel like it's just become such a routine that sometimes I forget I have a phone. So I'll leave it in classrooms. But I think it shows like how focused I am on learning and how the pockets actually like help improve like how well I do.
That's interesting.
And if I may, I mean, superintendents in the state right now are feeling a bit like what you've said, Kai, please, Governor, don't mandate or give us flexibility, because there's sort of that concern about how would you mandate it. But this is a place, we actually are ahead of most districts, certainly in Westchester County, because what you've just expressed, that largely in your classrooms now, the phone is out of the mix. Great colleagues in some neighboring districts are trying to get the middle schools there, not to mention the high schools. And in many states, it could be the mandate is to do what we're already doing here. So I think for us now, the challenge, we'll see what the board thinks, is that next level of conversation about in between and around the rest of the campus while you're on school time, what's happening.
Can I take us right there? Because I think having the phones out of classroom is an obvious thing. We wouldn't let kids bring video games into the classroom, a casino, movies. It's a phone, agnostically, but it does all those things. But I think that, the issue for me as a parent of a graduate, now a 10th grader, is how much extra unsupervised time that the phone is available during the school day. Because, over the summer, I received so many letters that people sent to me from New York, from various private schools, that all took the step of eliminating phones from the school day. Okay? Because in our school day, if a kid has a study hall, that, the cumulative availability of that phone in the 15 minutes between, walking to school, I see so many kids like that, in the 5 minutes between classes, in the 44-minute lunch, in the 88-minute study hall, it's 167 minutes that a kid can be on the phone, 2.5 hours, more than 2.5 hours, before they ever get home, and it's all unsupervised time. And my perception as a parent is so much of what happens, these things start in school, and then my child comes home and it's like, oh, I have to take care of this thing, or I have to answer this person, and it's this. All this sort of the opposite of mindfulness that has occurred all during the day in stretches and in drips that comes into the house. And then it's sort of the opposite of the tragedy at the Commons. You have these hundreds of families that have to manage these situations with their kids and fight these battles over screen time and redirect. And it's, we don't bear any of the cost of it. We don't see any of the cost of it, but I know what's going on. And it really, came home to me this summer in a number of ways. So, I do think that as a board, we need to seriously consider a move that a lot of districts, private schools have made and districts around the country are likely to make, which is eliminating phones from the school day. And, I point to, there was a survey done at the beginning of the summer in New York City, I guess it wouldn't be, maybe superintendents, and they said, what was the right age they feel developmentally where a child should have a phone? They said 16. That was the aggregate response. So I just think that, for those reasons of how much time and how dominating it has become to these kids' lives, we really need to take a look at making that move because, we've never it was never an affirmative discussion to let it in. We never had a community meeting. We never passed any, regulations. We just sort of showed up one day. And this is the first time we're coming to a reckoning with it. And, I think it's shown that reckoning is overdue and that there's some very serious consequences that a lot of families are dealing with. So we need to take that into account. Thanks.
So I hear what you're saying, and I agree. What I think, though, what's so powerful about what you're saying is, yes, it's a school issue, but it's also a family community issue, too, right? Because it's the parents who are buying the phones and setting the rules around the phones. And that's also then the opposite is like playing out in schools. So if you had different customs at home than at school, it can get complicated, right? So it seems like this is one of those multi-pronged approaches where you need to get the PTSA involved, you need to get the school board involved, all these different members of the community need to get involved with associated data, because you're right, there's lots of studies out there that show the harms of cell phone use. But I guess I sometimes pause and say, yes, the school has to make decisions and hold strong on different views, but there's also the whole community input angle. Because, we have elementary kids, third graders, bringing phones to school. So it is like the ultimate school-family situation.
Mm-hmm. I have one other request. When you're doing all this, is to and you did mention it, but or maybe it was Kai who mentioned it. In terms of teachers, I feel like there should also be some. I don't know what the right word is. Not restrictions. I think part of the policy should also include teachers' use of phones during, at least when they're in the classroom, when they have a class that they're responsible for. It feels like such a double standard to tell high school kids that they can't use their phone, which I think is good, and then the teacher goes on their phone. It's a personal feeling, but I think it's something worth thinking about.
Yeah, I can respond some. I think these points are spot on. I want to kind of hear where else the board is, because I think we want to begin giving energy internally to how do we move this ahead.
Mm-hmm.
And I think doing that very carefully with student leadership.
Mm-hmm.
So if it's that, and that's great, you're always great with that analysis of the numeric that actually has real meaning. That's a lot of time that's still within the school day, if you will. And so we can't control the rest. We can ask for partnership and ask for support, but what can we control? So it's tightening down on that. And I think the students here have been incredibly thoughtful about working with, in this case, Mr. Clayman. Ms. Hardesty is very committed on this issue. Mid-November is when she departs, but I'm quite confident Ms. Ware coming in feels the same commitment. Mr. Lopez told me at the end of the summer how he feels, which is kind of where you are, board president. So I think we want to do it thoughtfully, and this may be a place where Hastings can really, in a very student-centered way, take a lead. But I don't know if other board members want to add to what I'm hearing here, because it's not a vote, it's just a sense of consensus that helps.
Yeah, I agree with most of the points, but I do think student voice is key on this issue, especially in the high school, right? Because we're giving them responsibility, they're becoming adults. And I think, we heard two opinions here, and I would love to hear the opinions of a couple of students that have the opposite viewpoint and have them tell us why they think phones should be allowed in school. So I think hearing that viewpoint and having students with both those viewpoints sitting on the committee and coming to a consensus, which can all just end with the signing of what the governor wants. But if we have some control in this district, I think we have to hear from the students on both sides of the issue.
It's good.
In Mr. A, before leaving, it had multiple conversations, and there is definitely a diversity of opinion. And I think you sensed some of that here. You were both commenting on within the classroom. But this, one strong theme, and I think that's why it's important that Mr. Clayman and all have another high school level conversation. One big thing coming back is we're about to go out into the workforce and or higher ed. And we have to use phones actively there. So going cold turkey now, how does that help us? So but we'll see where we get. I think it's a great point as to get, re-energize the student input, so.
I'm sorry.
I was saying, and to Jody's point about, a double standard, we all have our phones out right now. So there is that piece, and students will hold you accountable.
Yeah.
It's true.
Yep.
And in some cases, it was, again, it was brought up, so I do want to bring it, especially for our English language learners who are using it for translation. There are reasons that are, beyond in terms of social use of phone. So, of course, we're looking into alternate technologies to be able to do that. But just to open that perspective a little as well.
I just wanted to note we're missing 2 board members tonight. I'm sure they will want to weigh in.
Yeah,
So.
yeah.
I also just want to, in this conversation, what really stays with me is something you said, Ella, which was the idea of realizing that without having your phone, how engaged you can be in the learning. And I think that's something to really, keep in mind in this discussion. That
Well, especially since we looked at that engagement data earlier that was so low, right? Like, is there a relationship? Who knows, right? But these are interesting questions.
Yeah. I mean, just quick context, and it picks up on where Melissa is, but for special ed students and others, there are digital needs, be it phones or not, we have to pay attention to. So those shifts are doing that. The other thing, every single assessment now of any meaning or weight beyond us, it's digital.
Yep.
So and that's not changing. There's some advantage to that. And the digital access for kind of how you manage time and coordinate with students, connect with students. I assume a number of your teachers are using some phone-based digital devices to coordinate and connect. And so it sort of cuts both ways in how that's handled.
I was just going to say, if I may, that a lot of the methods of communication between teachers and students happen on Google Classroom. And a lot of the times teachers will, post something really quick at 9 o'clock if I have the class last period, and they're saying, hey guys, I totally forgot to mention this, but you're going to need to bring in your textbook for class today.
That's true.
If I get that message, chances are I'm not going to be checking my Chromebook in, the minutes before I walk into this classroom. I'm more likely to be checking my phone. And I know a lot of people have, certain notification restrictions, et cetera, but I know that there are ways to go about keeping on certain notifications. So when it comes to talking or communicating with my teachers, a lot of the times I get important information through Classroom on my phone. And so if I'm checking my phone in the hallways, I'm seeing, have my parents said anything important, and have my teachers said anything important are my main two. So I think that also, I don't know if you guys know about the app Remind, but that's used for the few classes I have it with. I had last year with my SUPA history class. The peer leadership group uses it, and the student union uses it as well. So that's been a really vital way for us to get out information really quickly. So I think that the idea of the methods of communication between teachers and students and between students for important and time relevant issues is definitely something to keep in mind.
Thank you, Karen. Thank you. Any other questions or comments? No, I'm sure we're going to touch on this again soon. So, Dr. McCarthy, thank you very much. We're going to open up for our patient public. Thank you for public comment. There's a sign-up sheet there, right? Have it? Ella, thank you. Yeah. Welcome. Just state your name and address.
I did sign in. Yeah, it's Nicholas Baker, 71 Mountain Hope Boulevard. So first of all, I just want to thank the board and superintendent and Dr. Stemensky for moving forward on the YouTube. I actually think it's had a huge impact. I have a now 7th grader, and he's actually said people are playing more in YouTube at recess. I think people can still get YouTube Kids, and there's YouTube, and you can still get YouTube Shorts on that. So I guess a request I have is, to the extent the policy is going to change on YouTube to address some of the technical issues, that Dr. Szymanski raised, will parents be made aware of that so we kind of understand, how it's changed? I think that'll be helpful for parents. And I think I commend the school because I think we've been a leader on this issue. And I think it shows you can be a leader on these issues, and we should be leaders on these issues. I read an article recently in the New York Times about how many school districts have not gotten rid of YouTube, and it's very upsetting to a lot of parents. So I commend, again, the district for being a leader on that. On the issue of mobile phones in the high school, I don't currently have a high school student, but my personal preference is that we would have a ban on them. With all due respect to students, I mean, look, these things are fun. They're entertainment. Of course people are going to want to have them. I want to have one at work because I can, when I get bored, look at it. If my boss said, hey, we're going to get rid of mobile phones, I probably would be more productive. So while I'm all for listening to student invoice, and with all due respect to those two representatives who are incredibly articulate and very mature, we are still the grown-ups. And so I think we should listen, but ultimately the decision should be with parents and the grown-ups, is my personal view. And, the last thing I'll say is, hearing them not having the cell phones in the classes helps their education. There's the emotional education of school, and I think we can all agree having your phone out is a hindrance in a lot of ways to emotional education, at least on a kind of face-to-face aspect. So that's all I wanted to say, and look forward to continuing to hear on this important issue. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Kara Eisenpress, 14 Euclid Avenue.
Welcome.
Thank you. I want to join Nick and just so grateful to see the thoughtful consideration, the really wholesale view of this, the different people getting involved, and also the pace at which certain things are happening. I may be a cynic, but I just did not expect things to happen quickly at all. So really, thank you. The one thing that I still feel is missing is looking at the rampant use of the computers themselves. I am essentially device agnostic now. My laptop is exactly as distracting to me as my phone, even though it's not in my pocket. And so just knowing that students from the age of 11 are spending a huge amount of time on these devices, on apps owned by Google, I just think that has to enter into the conversation, and maybe it's a priority that's down the road, but it just feels like we can't leave that out of the discussion. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other public that would like to comment? No? Thank you. Moving on to update and district highlights. This is going to be on the big screen, right?
Yeah. I'll have to shift it over.
Superintendent.
If someone can help shift it over. I don't know if, is it up there? I'll be efficient with it.
Show you something. This is what I'm doing with a friend.
Yeah. So I think it's the second meeting we're using this format. Given it's been a very full meeting, I'll be extra efficient. And I really want to, for both of these presentations, particularly the technology one, I dumped a lot of things on the slides, and Melissa DiLibera made it look together, connected, and have a look to it. Similarly here, Kara Tomei, our new communications associate, and I, but working very much, Kara and Melissa, kind of are giving this a look, and we're trying to have some, if you will, continuity to this from session to session. So it should have a similar look every meeting, and then some of the content will start to be the same. But this is fresh. This is what just happened. Homecoming week was very powerful, very positive in so many ways. I felt fortunate to be able to spend a lot of time around a lot of it. So it's anecdotal, but it is the superintendent's anecdotes, so dare I sound serious. It was really quite a powerful week and a powerful set of events. And just to give you a sense, I'm not sure I can get this to play, but maybe here does it, I don't know. Not sure how I can get this to play here. But online, you can get it, so you get a good sense of this. There we go, my touch did work. So just give you, this was Kara filming this. This is the pep rally. So this is something that's all students and staff, maybe parents by drone. But here you get it. I'm glad you all laughed at that. You know, maybe you get a sense of just this great event. Each sport did a dance.
Love it.
And
Great.
So that little video, you can go back and look at it, the soundtrack's really nice, Kara put that together, but I think that's fun because that's eyes and ears, if you will, into really an all-student, all-staff event, but it really gave a sense of things. I will not read you these slides, but please go read them. We've not done a thorough athletic update for you, we're now doing that. And, you know, we have 1,600 students total, high school about 500. Some 70% of our high schoolers compete on an athletic team. And Drew and I were talking about this earlier today. He's our athletic director, and I get to meet with the coaches several times. I stress, I want us to win the character game. I'm not as concerned about the wins and losses, but I want us to win on the character side. And the other thing that came in mind is, if you're a coach at 2-8, you might go, oh, that's terrible. We may have tons of teachers. You may have a superintendent who's essence 2-8, but you don't see it. Coaching, it's very black and white at the end. There's your outcome, and it's done in public. So it is particularly difficult work. You know, a lot of your successes may be greater than that 2-8 record. I'm making the number up. But I think we should applaud all the things that are going on all our different teams. We've put a little narrative here so you get a sense of it. We're naming names, giving some statistics and all the rest. So go back and study this. And the coaches and everyone works incredibly hard, and our boosters are spectacular. They step up in all ways, and anyone who's around homecoming, be it the Friday night or the Saturday night or during the days, you know, our parents through the Boosters Club are really stepping up. They hold us to a standard, which I appreciate, but they very much step up. More records, more all the rest. You know, some of our teams, girls soccer, fabulous second-year coach. I've not had a family member or a player not come to me and say, my goodness, we love this coach. So that's a great example that the 0-4-1 does not reflect what Coach Anthony's doing in the sense of the development and growth of our young people. So more on athletics, you can look at it, see the highlights. What's been put together is varsity, JV, modified, all those levels we have. More athletics, you can go back and look at it again, all the levels here with some nice commentary for each of the teams. And then a visual that went back, that lovely video you had earlier. Now you may say, highlights the Knights. Who are the Knights? Well, this is a merger team. This is several districts coming together for the volleyball team. So that's who the Knights are. Back to school night, both the middle school and the high school, very, very important, very, very significant. Let me take a moment here, go to the side. I took 2 minutes, 3 minutes at the back to school night for the high school. And let me let you as a board know what I said. Some of you are in the room, some of you didn't. We had Andy present, and we'll get in a second what he presented here. He made a point of celebrating his family, and people really appreciated knowing he's got 2 young children and the devotion and energy there. And what he touched on, was the portrait, authentic learning, safety and security, very important, and technology. And You may have heard earlier, I stole his phrase. How do we minimize distractions for instruction? Meaning not have digital in the way of that. When he finished, Alex went up and spoke about a number of big topics, but then by design, I stood up and said the following. I said, we have two truths going on here, maybe two conflicting truths in Hastings. I'm told we've had a great, great opening, and people tell me that. That's the first truth. The second truth, which may conflict a bit, is this was last week. In the last 2 weeks, we've had to send out announcements about situations here in Hastings that we never want to send announcements out about. And so these really conflict. A great opening, yet news about behavioral issues within the high school and other situations that, how is that Hastings? Well, we had to send communications out. So I said, what's the path forward here? The path forward for us is one, connections, to insist on connections. And I know, having gotten to know Andy Clayman very well, that he's all about connections. He's about, in my mind, that any student here has an adult they know well and vice versa, and many adults. But how do we get those connections? We're too small not to have that. We've had it for decades here. So it's really a doubling down, tripling down that idea of connections. The second thing is that, and this, if you see something, say something. If you see something, say something. So I'm saying to a room of 500 parents the other night, because we're in this together. If you have any concern, any worry, we had created a couple years ago who to call when. You know, start as close to your child and student as possible. And then if it's not working, work up the ladder. And particularly if it's a safety or a wellness issue and you're not getting an answer, beat a path to Melissa DeLibera and she'll find me and we'll engage. But work that ladder, student, as close to your student as possible. The other part of this, third, is we have to respect privacy. We have to respect privacy. We're going to tell you as much as we can, but there are very strict laws about protecting the privacy of our students, all of whom are minors, which adds to the legal limitations beyond what New York State law tells us. So you may want to know about a consequence. We can't tell you per law. You may want to know about the particular names. We can't tell you. And so part of that, though, and this is what I stress, and afterwards that night people came up to me and on this one said, thank you. It's easy to gossip. It's easy to chatter. Don't do the easy thing. Do the hard thing, which is to say, I'm going to respect that privacy via social media. I'm going to respect that privacy in the hallways, because many of us tomorrow could be in that moment, and we don't want to be on the other side of that chatter. So we got to respect the privacy. And then on a positive note, I tried to end in the room on a positive note. I said, all around us, our students are under intense negative pressure. You look at the discussion in the nation, look what's happening in the world. You look at the ability to people to throw stuff at each other verbally and all the rest. Can we be an oasis against that stuff in Hastings? Can we be a place that really embraces the positive? So that's what I stood up to say was coordinated and planned, because there was a bit of some heaviness in there. I didn't want Andy to have to be heavy on his first remarks back, but that sense of two truths, but how we go about it. Now to some really good news. I told you about athletics, but our musicians are kicking it. They are hitting it at a high level. You heard some of that from Kai and Ella earlier. It's up here in great detail. Jasper continues to wow the world, literally. Literally, that is a literal fact with Jasper as a keyboardist. But then joined in this last week, and there's going to be a bigger article on this in the Hastings Happenings coming up, and some people in the room will recognize certain faces up here and names. But these are great accomplishments for these larger set of musicians. And again, you can see the detail and find out about it. But we are truly, I think, a Renaissance district. Now we're going to start a look, and I said we're going to try in each presentation, so we're much more than this one class, please. But that's why I call it a look-in. So here's some interesting things around science going on at FMS. So we'll try and just give you a quick glimpse of that in each meeting. Hillside, PTSA, SEPTA, incredible partners for us. You can see the images and the photos there, but that's part of what's been happening the last 2 weeks. And now, so you know there's a future. I always want a future. Here's what's coming up for us over the next 2 weeks, including an upcoming board meeting on the 8th. So I hope that was helpful.
That was great.
Always nice. Love
Thank you.
All right. I needed tech help.
No problem.
Well, thank you.
I did too.
All right. Thank you very much. Moving on to report from our business official. Anything to update, or?
Yeah, I mean, I just have one little comment in there, but the other thing I just want to mention, it's not in the update, but at our next meeting, will be laying out some dates for upcoming facilities meetings and start putting things, providing some information to the board. And we want to have our facilities meetings, but also to start having larger discussions around some of the work that we're starting to kind of put together in, with the fields and such. So I just wanted to mention that is underway and it's ongoing, but we'll be able to bring you a much better updated schedule at the next meeting.
Great.
For when the board will be able to see some of that.
Okay. Any questions?
I was just going to say that I was at a field hockey game and people were commenting that the field is better.
Oh, that's
and
good.
there was less water and runoff and stuff. And I was like, well, I think the district's been working on it.
Yes. The work at the Burke Estate has been completed, and I think, there was a lot of the drainage we found to be broken or not functioning correctly, so I think that's definitely helping, and our grounds crew does do a wonderful job maintaining our fields, and we have done some improvements on the baseball field in the last year or so as well, so I'm glad it looked good.
Can I add 3 points, Maureen? So it's very important in these processes that we have people behind the scenes working intensively, and then everything's going to be in the public.
Yeah.
We got to do some private behind the scenes work with the various firms that you as a board have approved that we work with. So that's LAN. They now, for the fields, have brought in another firm that we're working with. But that's critical. Anywhere in a public entity, you still need private time. But all of the work will be shown, it'll be discussed, it'll be debated. We will bring it everywhere in Hastings so people see it and understand it. 3 big parcels. There's the BCS that's underway, Building Conditions Survey study that's going to give us insights on things that have to happen. Second is work on the Farragut Complex, some very innovative, creative ideas how to get us more instructional and good student space. And then third, what is our approach on the fields? What is our approach on the fields? Probably a mixed models. And turf will be in there, but also how do we maximize the quality of our natural surfaces? So work's underway. We will be bringing that out. And thank you, Maureen, for great leadership to bring us to where we are. But you as a board and then the community will be hearing actively.
Thanks, Mel. Thank you, Maureen. Moving on to business items. Are there any comments or questions regarding business items 1 through 4?
The only thing I want to point out is we are going to be revisiting whether we continue with the lice checks that are occurring. And we'll discuss that at a later date. This one was scheduled and it was done, but there was some thinking around, well, there's some things around lice, right? Like you're not allowed now to send students home if they have lice and all the rest. So there's now some concern from the state level that we shouldn't be doing checks, yeah.
State law, CDC.
So just
Yeah.
keep them in school and then everybody can realize, so why bother checking?
Exactly. I should have not.
Feeling itchy just talking
Oh, I know,
about
I was itching my head earlier. But I just wanted to flag that not so much as like we did schedule as we typically do the one, and this is just for Hillside School, but in light of just advice from our medical director and the rest, we'll bring that to you prior to scheduling any more, but currently we aren't, I guess, allowed to send students home if they have lice is the long and short of it. I mean, a parent can pick their child up, but we
You
can't.
could call a parent and tell them and they could come and pick them.
Correct. Yeah, but you can't
send them home.
force them home, yeah.
Correct.
So
Thank you, Maureen.
that's all, I just wanted to mention that. As it will be something I'm sure that'll come up.
Yeah, sure. Are there questions or comments for business items 1 through 4? Is there a motion to approve business items 1 through 4?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Moving on to placement and services for CSE and CPSE. Are there any questions or comments regarding placement and services for CSE and CPSE? No? Is there a motion to approve our placement and services for CSE and CPSE?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Aye.
Moving on to personnel as a consent agenda. Are there any appointments, are there any questions about our appointments, amendments, or retirements? Melissa, just a note,
11 and
my wife
12,
is
yeah.
one of these, I'm going to abstain, so just when we vote, so. So motion to approve our appointments, amendments, and retirements.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And abstaining. Thank you. Moving on to minutes. This would have been from our last meeting, September 10th. Are there any questions or comments regarding our minutes from the last meeting? So motion to approve our minutes from the September 10th meeting.
So move.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. Moving on to second public comment. It's an opportunity if anybody wants to speak. No? Moving on to agenda.
You have one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't give you enough time. Apologies.
I'll make it short and sweet.
Okay, welcome.
Hi, my name is Dawn Jenneman. I'm at 3 Beaver Street in Hastings. And I just wanted to say thank you for, I attended the Hastings High School Back to School night. And I'm glad that you addressed the concerns of the community and not just glazed over it. So I wanted to say thank you. And it was also nice that it wasn't the new principal having to say it, but I was surprised that he didn't, so I'm glad that you did. And I didn't realize that was your plan, but because I think moving forward, I think everybody needs to be involved in the solution and as legally as you can, but also explaining why you couldn't was really helpful to hear, because we got that message, and if you know things that are going on, but it was kind of like, what does this say? But saying why you couldn't say more than that made more sense, and it gave it more context. So I think that was really nice way to address the elephant literally in the room that night, or the elephants. And so I just wanted to say thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks for all you guys.
Thank you. Very kind. Any other public? No? Okay. Moving on to agenda review. This is going to be right into October, so October 8th. We've already flagged that we're going to try and hold time for executive session.
So, yeah, if I may update.
sure.
So actually, we're going to have to find a different time for the executive session because there's the audit report. The audit team will present right at the start of the meeting at 6. Ahead of that, there needs to be the audit committee hearing from the audit team.
Yeah.
And that's standard, so that'd be roughly 5:30-ish. And given some of the topics that we need an executive session for, want to carry over from tonight, it would be too much of we're jamming too much together,
Can
so.
we just do it at the end of the meeting?
You could do, yeah, we're bringing you not
tonight,
as much.
but in 2 weeks at the end
Yeah,
of
in 2
the
weeks, it's a
meeting.
lighter meeting than this. The audit report will be your main big piece unless you think
We
you'll
might have some things on facilities start emerging by then.
Yeah, I think it won't be any
Nothing
big,
major,
it won't
not
be
like
bigger than
tonight.
this. So we could map
I mean,
it
it just
so by
seems
8.
easier to do
Yeah.
that than to try to get a time when everybody could do it, I think.
We could play it by ear, see how much
Tonight it's
stuff
not that
stacks
late.
up. No, it's true.
So I
Compared to
think,
the olden days, we'd be getting
Well,
out at midnight.
I think Melissa D. would agree, because she has to work the magic on scheduling
11,
for at least the
12.
one topic. It's a good news topic. We need
Right,
to
it
help
was
the board
crazy.
help us think through something that needs to be an exec session. That, why don't we, for that one, have it at the end of the meeting and just be efficient?
Yeah,
Does
I
that
think
make
so.
sense? So that checks
Yes.
off one.
yeah.
And maybe actually checks off 2, but the carryover from tonight, that's then the remaining question.
Yeah.
I don't know how you want to address the carryover from tonight that you didn't quite get to. And of
Could
course, the
we
public-
stay here for a little bit now, you mean? Is that with the look on your face?
Yes.
Yeah.
I'm fine
Because-
with that too.
Because we're all here, and it's hard to coordinate times, and
Could
letting
we-
2 more
and
weeks
we could
pass.
just at least,
My daughter can hear. I mean, I have a hard stop, kind of.
If you
What's
have
your
a
hard
hard stop,
stop?
should the 4 of us still meet,
I have
though?
to give
We
my
still
daughter
have
dinner.
quorum.
Nobody's home.
so what time do you want to leave by? Or do you want to leave now?
I was, looking at-
Well, I mean, we would
But we
still
could
have
still-
quorum,
the
even
quorum-
if you can't be here.
fair enough, fair
Well,
enough.
can we do it in 15 minutes and really be efficient?
Sure.
Yeah, I can stay for 15 minutes.
Let's try.
I'm just mentioning it,
meeting,
it's
yeah.
not a deal breaker, I'm just saying. We have quorum, we have enough.
Yeah.
So close to you.
Okay,
All right,
all right. So did I handle this correctly, Melissa?
we got to resolutions.
I see you going into an executive session right now.
Yeah. And then the other one we'll do on the 8th at the end of the meeting. We'll just be efficient in the meeting. Okay. So we'll modify this little plan to show executive session at the end of the meeting, on the 8th.
Yeah, October 8th.
But do we have to publicize something about having gone back into exec session?
We're in public,
Okay,
so
good.
we're gonna
Yeah, we'll just
stay
post
in
it and then handle it, yeah.
Good question.
Thank you, glad that worked out. Moving on to board comments. Anyone? No?
Go to exec session.
You just adjourn and go into exec session.
I'm sorry?
You just say you're adjourning.
Should I adjourn on this meeting?
Yeah,
or-
that we're
Yes.
adjourning.
Adjourn this
and moving
meeting.
into
You have
executive
to
session
adjourn
and
it
we will-
officially.
Is there a motion to adjourn this meeting so that we can move into executive?
So
session?
moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
And you won't return.
I won't return. Thank you.